Hello, everyone. We good? Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this little talk where I will be talking about, we'll be making a bit of an overview of audio for video games, more specifically in an indie context and geared more towards programmers. Some introductions are in order. My name is Oleg. And I'm an SIU alumnus, and I've done my bachelor in game audio, more specifically on audio specialization. And okay, there was a so weird. Okay. Oh no. Okay, I will just reveal all of the slides because there seems to be some bug. And I am currently working at Siro Games here in Geneva, and we're working on releasing our first game, Weko the Mask Gatherer. Don't hesitate to check it out. If you want a very brief description, it's essentially like a Zelda mixed with a little bit of Dark Souls geared towards a younger audience. Okay, let me just reveal everything so that we don't have this happen. Okay. So the purpose of this presentation is to make you aware of various audio production and programming tools that you will encounter. In doing so, I hope to also help you communicate better with your sound designer coworkers, as well as to give you a bit of an idea how audio might be handled in a typical indie game project. And at the end of this presentation, I'll have a big slide for various resources you might be interested for digging deeper into various subjects. Because this is essentially a 30-minute summary of a whole day of slides that I've done as a 6-hour course for a class at SIU. So I'm only covering the basics. Well, no, that's not going to work, but essentially, let's start with the basics. What is sound? It's something that vibrates, something that needs to transmit the vibration, so there's no sound in space, and something to perceive or record said vibration. So far, nothing difficult. We can characterize the simplest sound with, there we go, with its frequency, which determines how many oscillations, how many vibrations they are per second, and this determines the pitch of the sound. This is the higher this frequency is, the higher the sound appears. The lower it is, the deeper the sound appears. It is. We also measure it with its amplitude, which roughly maps to how loud a sound is. And it's measured in decibels, which is a special scale where increasing it by 3 doubles the volume, and conversely, decreasing the value by 3 means we're having the intensity of the sound. This is done because if we used a linear scale, it wouldn't really have much meaning to us humans, because our sensitivity to sound volume is very wide. But that's in theory. When we're programming, realistically, we're working with just normalized values between 0 and 1. So Next, a signal. What is a signal? It is a quantity that varies over time. In our case, this is the air pressure for sound, and it can be continuous, meaning that at every point in time there is some kind of valid value here. This is what the hardware works with, the microphone and the headphones. But we as programmers can't really represent that, because that would require potentially infinite memory, and we don't have access to that. So we quantize it. So we transform this continuous signal into a discrete one. So you get your original continuous signal like that, and you're going to sample it on one axis a certain amount of times a second, and you're going to approximate the sound pressure with a number, the resolution of which defines how accurate you're going to, how wide of a range of loudnesses you can represent with yeah, and you get this discretized signal, which is also known as, come on, there, as an impulse train or PCM, because it's literally a train of single impulses. And this is very useful to us programmers, because it's literally just buffers of floats or integers in memory. So from there you can do pretty much whatever you want with it. You can add signals, subtract them, you can shift them around, do code convolutions, like some special operations that are important, in which I will not go into details here. And yeah, the common sample rate and bit depths that you will be working in, you will be working with are these. For the sample rate, meaning that how many times a second you're going to try to approximate the air pressure. By default, for most general application, it's 48 kilohertz, or sometimes 44 kilohertz, which correspond to DVD quality audio and CD quality audio, respectively. If you need to go below that sampling rate, like so for instance in a multiplayer game, when you need to pass some audio data for the players speaking to each other, for instance, just do keep in mind that 8 kilohertz is the minimal sampling rate for having intelligible speech. If you go lower than that, you'll have trouble. So for instance, voice over IP applications like Skype and such, there's typically use 16 kilohertz. And for the bit depth, so it's the like this vertical axis. This defines again how loud and quiet of a sound you can represent. So this is referred to as the dynamic range of a sound, of a recording. So for instance, if you wanted to record an orchestra where there's some really faint sounds and very loud ones, 16-bit would be enough. You would need at least 24-bit for representing those kind of level variations. So internally though, for the engines, oftentimes, at least in Unreal Engine, the sound is stored as 16-bit integers. So even if you import a sound in like 64-bit integers, they will convert it to 16 by default. This is done for optimization sake, because they can then easily transform those 16 bits into 32-bit floats, which is what actually we're working with when we're dealing in audio encode usually. Yeah, but the integer representation is still very useful for storing the actual data on disk. Okay. Oh no. Yeah. So if you're working with a sound designer that might not have worked on a game before, they might start asking you about these. How many sound channels, when they produce a sound, how many channels should that sound have? And for most of the cases, it's simple. It's this one, just single mono sound. The reason for that is that unlike in linear media, you never know in advance when a certain sound will happen. So consequently, you cannot mix a sound to be located on your right or on your left because you don't have that information in advance. That's what the engine does for you. There is some notable exceptions to that, and that is anything that is extra diegetic, meaning that sounds that are outside of the game world. So, for instance, your music, and if you have like 2D cutscene videos, then it becomes possible to anticipate where different sounds will be coming from, and then it makes sense to have multi-channel audio. And one last thing, when the sound designer does turn in assets for you, it's good to have them normalized, meaning that the loudest sound, the loudest part of the sound is fully ranging between like the -1 and +1 kind of value. This is so that you can more easily mix sound, the levels of sound relative to each other later on. So, for the audio storage formats, the only one pretty much that you will be using in practicality is the WAV file. There is a 4 GB limit on it, but good luck making a sound larger than 4 GB. And any middleware, any engine will accept that. You do not use MP3s for compressed audio because there's problems with looping the sounds. And if you do really need something that needs to be compressed, usually what you do is you just import the WAV file, and there's options to compress it. And then the engine or the middleware that you're using will compress that asset into something like an OGG. So it's not up to the sound designer to do this manipulation. So you might have heard by now me talking about audio middleware and engines, and you might be wondering what is the difference between these two things. An audio middleware is, well, an audio engine is just a module that's part of your global game engine. And that audio engine might or might not use a third-party implementation for working with audio. And that's what the middleware is. It's a specific tool that you can integrate into your own engine that offers a dedicated editor for your sound designer to work with, in case the engine you're working with does not provide the features that you need. Yeah, and last thing about that, audio middlewares, they're nice, but you do need to go through the trouble of actually integrating them into your project, which just adds a bit of complexity. So unless you have a reason to use them, don't use them. If you do have a reason to use them, great, use them. It's For instance, in Unreal Engine 5, like you said, there's not really much sense in using Fmod because there's already a very robust series of tools that are already exposed in the engine. But if you're making your own C++ engine, it makes sense to use a middleware. Yes. My bad. There. Last point. There you go. The two notable middlewares that you most probably will be using is either Fmod or Wise. Fmod is more of a, as far as I know, more used in the indie part of the industry because it has a lower budget requirements, and it's just much more user friendly. And also there's no annoying launcher that you have to go through every time you want to launch the program, which is really annoying. And Wise, on the other hand, is used more in the AAA industry, namely Ubisoft and C use that. And they also apparently have really good customer support, which might be important. And it's more feature complete right out of the box. As far as I know, you can extend Fmod as well, but it's a lot of the features that you can find in Fmod don't come directly right out of the box for Fmod, which depending on what you want to do with audio in your game might be important. And yeah, the nice thing about these two middlewares is that there's no royalties involved. You just need a license, and after that, you're good. There are other audio middlewares, but they're either too niche, not available in development, or just all of the above. Oh. So now onto something a bit more concrete, which is the kind of concepts that you will be encountering in developing the game. The first concept is the concept of the bus, and I highly encourage you to use that concept, which is just a way to group kinds of sounds together. The idea being that if you want, I don't know, make the dialogue really pop out, well, you just lower the ambience, sound effects, music, and UI, and you would just have to lower these for things instead of like 150 different sounds that might be playing in your game. And this is an example of the parameters that you have on the bus of Wise, for instance. Voices, and this is where we come to the point that the question that was asked previously. The concept of a voice is simple. It's just a sound that is playing in the game. And from there, you can have physical voices or virtual voices. Physical voices is really the stuff that you hear over your headphones, the stuff that you hear over the speakers. This is the sounds that are actually getting processed by the game engine, and that might impact your performance. And for that reason, these are usually limited. So for Unreal Engine, by default, there's 32 sounds that you can actually hear at a time, unless you change that settings in the parameters. Because if you have like 1,000 sound and on each of them you need to apply a reverb or something, that will be very problematic. But we can't really limit the designers to 32 sounds. So we have the concept of virtual voices. And to the designer, there isn't a difference. They will just play both of them. It's just that the engine will make a distinction between these two, in the sense that if we say have two NPCs talking about something over here, and we're getting in reach to hear their conversation, they will start talking, say hello, how was your day, blah blah blah, and then you walk away, and you wait like 10 seconds and go back to them. You would expect the conversation to have moved on to something like, oh, my wife is telling me something about my grandma. I don't know. But it would be very jarring if when you approached them again, that the conversation would restart. It would equally be jarring if you approach them again, that the conversation would restart exactly where you left off. So the time needs to be updated, and that's the only thing that virtual voices do. So they don't send the resulting audio to be processed, but their clip gets updated in time. And these, you can have an unlimited number of these. So yeah. Real-time parameter controls. So that's how you link your audio to your gameplay. So a typical example would be your character has a stamina mechanic. So when he's tired, he'll gradually be switching from relaxed breathing .wave to tired breathing .wave. And while you could do this blending between these two clips yourself as a programmer, you're probably not going to do a very well job at it compared to a sound designer. So what you do is that either the engine or the middleware you're working with will expose you with these real-time parameter controls, which, depending on the engine and the middleware, are called just parameter controls or just parameters. And they are just essentially plain old data that you as a programmer will have to set. So for instance, how tired is the character? And then on the editor side, the sound designer can then mix these two sounds nicely to make nice transition using this parameter that gets updated every frame, and that's your job to update it. So yeah, and these are typically part of the event, and the event is just the thing that you actually call play on. Different middleware and engines have their own name for it. For instance, in the Unreal Engine, they're called cues, sound cues. But it's essentially the same thing. It's something that you play that has some data that needs to be played, and some parameters that define how it should be played, how it should be mixed. So, for instance, for playing breathing cue, you would have the two wave clips for the breathing and an RTPC. And finally, that's for the programming side, and a bit of info about the sound designer side. Sound designers work with what are called DAWs, digital audio workstations, and this is where they can actually create the sounds, because middlewares and the game engine is great for setting up the logic when a sound should be played, etc. But they typically don't expose you with functionality to create sounds, unless in the meta sounds, where I know you can generate sounds on the fly. For most industries, the most popular DAW is Pro Tools. Except in the video games industry, because here we don't like having to sell our kidneys in order to afford a software license. So we use a Reaper instead, which costs $60. It's not open source, but it's very extendable and customizable. And finally, if you're a programmer and you just want to experiment with sounds, I highly recommend Audacity, which is open source, which is free, and it's used a lot in academia, and it has some fun little features like their own little scripting language that allows you to manipulate sounds. This is typically what I use as a programmer. And one last tool that audio designers may or may not use is the sound banks. So audio designers sound banks, because there is also the concept of middleware sound banks. A middleware sound bank is just a big file that contains all the audio that will be played in the game. Audio designer sound banks is just a service, typically online, when you can download high quality sounds that have been made by professionals. So it's typically not free, although there are some. But you can also find some good quality assets apparently on things like freesounds.org. I have mixed results with that, but I've been told that they are good sounds out there. And here are some examples of sound banks that my sound engineer friends have recommended me. And hopefully, ooh, no, there you go. Hopefully now, with all of this, you can understand a little bit better what your sound designer might be saying to you. And you have some good references for the software that you might need to be using for creating your game. And with those, I hope that you are better prepared to create a compelling sound experience for your game, because it can really be very impactant, like in this game, Darkwood, which is a horror game where you control a character from a top-down view, not particularly scary. And the audio really turns it into from just a little spooky walk in the forest into a genuinely terrifying experience. I highly recommend you playing it. So yeah, that's all the time I have. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. And here I am leaving you a bunch of references if you want to read up on some particular topics more in details. And also I have a 160 plus slide version of the talk available online, where I go much further into details about a lot of stuff related to sound and gaming. There you go.
Thank you for the talk. I have just a question. I did not understood why you can't use MP3.
It has to do with the way that looping is managed. It's when you're trying to loop an MP3, depending on the individual file, it might not sync correctly to restart. For things like I don't know, food sounds or something. If there's like something bad in there, every time you take a step, that's going to be really annoying. That, and there is, if you really need compression, there is already a format for that, is the OGG. Really, if a audio designer turns in an MP3 asset to you, it's like an artist turning in a JPEG to you, you know. It's just not what the format is made for.
Okay, so you have to ask the sound designer to give you a WAV file or OGG file.
Typically not an OGG, like I explained, because usually what you do, you get the wave, you import it, and you can just tick a little box for saying compress it, and it will compress it into a specific format like the OGG.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question regarding the integration of Fmod, for example, or WeWise. My engine has its own like asset pipeline where it compresses the images, maybe package them up in some way. Does Fmod also has its own packaging system, or
yes.
do you handle? Okay.
Yes, it is middleware sound banks. So it's when you import a sound when using a middleware, you don't import it into your engine. You import it into the Fmod editor, and then it will consolidate all of the sounds and make a sound bank out of it that then the engine has to use.
Okay, so then the sound designer will directly check in a sound bank or the WAV files, and there is a step.
It depends how you guys organize yourself. If the I mean, typically you would have both the say WISE project and the Unreal repository in the same source control tool, and then you don't really have to worry about manually importing audio banks. And actually, usually you have the option. Sound banks are usually actually not even shared via source control. These are files that can be directly generated for the machine, so that you don't have to push this big file that can be regenerated easily at the press of a button. Usually there's an integration in the engine for saying regenerate sound banks directly. So it's
okay, good to know. So the Fmod or WeWise project is a folder in itself, and
and then when you pull the project, you just, before hitting playing, you generate the sound bank sound. I mean, that's the theory.
Good, thank you.
In practice, it's a bit different.
Hi, so I worry that the answer to this is it depends, but would you expect the sound designer to actually be working directly on the game, like iterating on the sound design, iterating on the mixing and the signals while playing the game, or is it more like they will do something and then they'll send it to you when you put it in?
In my very limited experience, because I'm a junior, it's usually this second option where, or first option, I don't know, where they're just turning wave assets to you and then that's it. In my opinion, it's a waste of potential, because if you actually trust your sound designer to do stuff, and interact with the engine themselves, maybe teach them a little bit of blueprint or something, then they can actually make for something much more compelling. And when the programmer tells them that they can or can't do anything, well, they can oftentimes understand why that is. And I think that's just it just opens the door for something more interesting to happen. Whereas if you just say, give me the wave files, then you get the files and that's it.
So you could end up with beautiful sound effects which you mix in a really incompetent way.
That's the risk.
Okay,
and that's the risk that middlewares typically try to avoid, because you're not the programmer doing the mixing. It's using the middleware's editor. The sound designer creates the way sounds mix together using RTPCs.
Okay, thank you.
How does it work for big projects where you can't load all the sound at once? Are there mechanism to load only what you want at a time? Or?
Honestly, I don't know, because I'm a junior programmer in an indie company. But I know that things like Unreal Engine have their own way to use what's they called. I don't remember the term exactly, but it's other baking data. So I imagine including audio data, you can have it be compiled on a server remotely and have other users connect to that server. So I imagine there is something like that for sound as well, so that the sound banks are actually somewhere else and not on the local machine. I'm assuming.
Yeah, but there is no a system in those middlewares that allow to split things into multiple chunks of data.
Into multiple sound banks?
Yeah, so maybe you just have to make different sound banks.
Yeah, it's something that I didn't mention because of lack of time. But yeah, you would typically not have all of the sounds in a single sound bank. You would separate by languages, you would separate by levels, you would separate by sounds that need to be present here always or just for certain parts of the game. Yeah, it's not a single sound bank, it's packs of sounds packed together that the engine then loads when it needs.
Okay, so there is a system but it's still to the engine to choose which sound bank to load depending on
the. It depends. For things like if you're going to integrate, Wise into Unreal, then yes, that's the plugin for Wise for Unreal manages that. But I think that if you start interacting with the C API for fmod, if I remember well, you have to yourself be loading the banks.
Thank you very much for your talk. I never really managed to understand the memory loading of sounds and the differences between streaming and not streaming. Can you explain a bit more? Because in Unreal 5 it seems that they are all streaming. I'm not really sure, but
I don't know that myself. But usually, as far as I know, at least in middlewares, when you have a sound, you can specify whether it's streamed or inlined. And the difference between these is that something that you, like I said, for middleware, something that you have to decide. And the distinction is simple. Is this a short sound? Then no need to stream it. Is it a sound that you can, or is it a sound that you can predict when it will become needed, like for linear music? Then you know that the next couplet will happen in 3 seconds. So you don't need it in memory now. So for that, you will be typically streaming that sound.
But what is exactly the difference between streaming or not? Exactly. What is exactly streaming, you know?
Oh, it's just that for streaming sounds, you don't load the whole sound into memory. Okay. You just load in the section that's currently relevant.
Thank you.